I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Martin Pinsonnault, the supervising sound editor for CODA. Martin, you have been working in film since the 90s. You have a lot of credits. I'm curious, though, how much experience you had prior to CODA of working on a film with deaf characters and how to depict that experience through sound.
Well, that was the first experience on a film with deaf people. Every film has its own specific subject and difficulties, and for me, that was something new, actually.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious with you and the director, Sean Hayter, how the two of you sort of collaborated to figure out the best way to represent that experience.
Well, Sean is really close to these people, like intimately. So she's been working with them to really improve the film in that regard, particularly. So for her, it was really important to be very close to them and to offer some reality of how their life is. So we really investigated a lot with them. We had some questions that we brought for them specifically on how they perceive sound, and how, aside then with their ears, and how we could play with this in the sound design of the film. Along with, also, there's another thing with, because when they talk, actually they don't talk like us, but they use other types of ways to talk, and they play around. They have some mimics, but they also use their voice a lot, and their fingers. They tap on their chest. So for Foley and work like this, for us, it was really something very particular about the film, is not to emphasize too much on it, but that it's real, and that it touches. And also on top of that, it helps us to understand them more clearly by being able to decode all these little sounds that they make when they talk.
Yeah, well, there's those scenes with the family is at home, and a lot of those scenes, I don't remember them having too much of a score underneath them, a musical score. So we're really focusing on the tiniest of sounds that the family is making as they're communicating with each other at the dinner table. And I'm curious just how much work you had to do to sort of enhance those very subtle sounds when they're communicating.
Well, the basic idea is because they don't hear, so they don't hear what they're doing. So they're making a lot of noises all the time, even though where their cutleries or their plates, and insisting, banging the table and all. So it's very, very noisy. So yeah, we had to redo all that specifically in order to bring this like a bit awkward, in a way where, oh my God, it's making all this sound. And yes, it's making all this sound, and that you can become crazy when you hear all that, actually. So it was something very important for Sean to do for this scene, particularly, really to understand that they don't hear, so they don't know how much sound they make.
Also, the film, it starts with a kind of rattling hum. I noticed on the second watch here, just going over the water and finally introducing us to these characters on the boat. And there's actually a number of scenes that are out in the water throughout the film. So how much of that background sound of the water and the boat was just natural versus what you had to create yourself?
Well, as usual, the sound recordist on the set had the priority on the dialogue of the actors, and he was able to do some sounds, but we had to kind of redo it all from scratch using sound effects and ambiences that we gathered through the years. So it's kind of like a big puzzle that we make. And so for the boat scenes, we had to make the rumble and the growling. So because these are sounds that they could hear themselves, they know anytime the motor is riding. and they know when it's fast, they know when it's slow, just because it's in their body. So for us, it was really important to cover these areas of sound where it's not just what we hear, it's what we feel. So the sea scenes were really a question of feeling. And also, one other thing I could say about this is that Sean, considering that Ruby was the only person in the family that was able to hear, Sean really wanted her to experience life like in an immersive way, compared to her parents. So one of our tasks, the sound team, was to actually build like a big surroundings of ambiances and motors, so that she would always be surrounded by the lake, the forest, and the school even, and she's always like in the middle of everything. So that was really a great direction to go with the sound design of the film.
Yeah, well, one of those examples I noted was when she's out on the lake, and like there's that one scene where she's singing happy birthday and it's just like echoing throughout the lake, and it creates these great acoustics. Yeah. Can you talk about creating that sound?
Well, we can all relate to some kind of similar experience where we have lived in a lake where there are some rocks, where the acoustic of a lake without wind is absolutely magnificent. So, and it's kind of magic just by itself. So for us, it was a way to bring it as simple as that, to be able to feel it, so that it was like we were there. And when we kind of cross this line in a film where we make believe that we're there, there's some kind of magic where the spectator kind of loses the sense of being watching a movie and actually entering. So the water sounds with the swimming, those, and with the acoustic of the lake, all the efforts were done to make believe that we were there. And on the set, we recorded some reverbs directly in this place that we applied on the dialogue at the mixing stage and in the music too as well. So when she's singing, so it's like we use these atmospheres, these reverbs, to blend everything all together. And it's part of the magic. So it's particularly evocative in that scene.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It has a great surround sound feeling for me too.
Yeah.
And there's also just so much music that's present throughout the film, whether it's, her singing or her being in the choir, or like her dad listening to rap music because he likes the bass.
Yeah.
What was your collaborative process with the music department?
Well, in a case like a film like this, where music is really part of the film and it's been actually shot right on shooting most of the time with the music team. So we've been working together, the music and the dialogue, so that we'd be able to go from one to the other. So they took the raw material for the music that they recorded on set, and they really played that. And on their side, and also use the acoustic, like I told you just before, to really improve and to also eventually make some adjustments on the performance for one reason or the other. So for us, and then on our side, we had to build anyway all the track anyway. So we had to do it too. So we do it, both of us, the dialogue team and the music team, so that when we're in the reality and then they start singing with the music, we in a good film with music, we need to feel that there's no difference between the dialogue that sounds in the room and the voice of the actor that is singing. So when it's really well done, in a way, it's seamless. So in this effort between sound effects, sound design, and music, that was a big effort to make it seamless, depending on where we were actually singing, in a room, a small room with the guitar, or in a big theater with a lot of people in it.
Right. Yeah, it is seamless. But I will say there is one very notable sound moment in the film, that is where Ruby's parents come to the school concert and the sound fades out. And we just watch the scene play out from the parents' perspective, and it's completely silent for the hearing audience. Can you talk about what the discussions were about that scene and how long to stay in that silence? I don't know if you were responsible for that aspect, or just how to fade out the sound, all those different aspects.
Well, the use of silence in films is something that we're kind of familiar with, because we know that silence can be as powerful as sound, sometimes in some situations where we need to think differently about the story that we're being told. So regarding this, we know the power of silence, but we didn't want to overdo it. And considering also that we wanted to tell the story through Ruby's perspective, so that it was hard to go from one world to the other in the same scene. So for us, that was a way to concentrate this moment in the final scene, so that we would make an impact out of it, so that suddenly, after an hour and 15 minutes, we suddenly hear it the way they hear it. And I must say that it's effective when we use it in one place, and when we do it otherwise elsewhere. And we use the use of silence elsewhere in the film, but not as obvious as this one.
Yeah, it's a remarkable scene, I must say. And also one of the other showcase scenes for your work, I think, is the scene where Frank and Leo are out on the water, and they have this observer with them who is a hearing person, and the alarm goes off, and there's sort of some confusion happening about what's happening, and the alarm is very loud, and the Coast Guard comes in. How did you go about accomplishing all the different sounds of that scene from your department?
Well, first we had to really understand the situation of them not hearing what was happening, and actually that was putting themselves in danger in some way. And because Ruby wasn't there that day, put them in really a dangerous situation where they had to face this reality. So for us, it was a question of really understanding what was happening, us, and to understand that they didn't understand, and how awkward for everybody this was. So and also for all of us, obviously in this film, it's the biggest scene of the film in terms of sound. There's like an engine at 80 miles an hour, like rushing into another one, which is huge. It's making a lot of sounds. And there's music also. So it's like a combination of a lot of stuff. So it's all concentrated in this scene. So we had to manage between all the departments so that we wouldn't fight with each other in a way, and make a certain build up to the end, and not overdo it, obviously, too. So yeah, it is these scenes that are very noisy, they need work. They need work. They need, in order to bring them to a state where they're not too noisy, and that we focus on the right thing, that we remove all the stuff that we don't need, and it's really like a work in progress up to the end. And we push the music, we make sure dialogue is there. It's like a big balance. So it's long process to mix these big mixing scenes.
Yeah, it's very complex. And it actually got me to wondering just about what kind of resources you had, because, you know, this is an indie film. I don't know how much of a budget was dedicated to your department, and sort of how much time you had, but what kind of challenges did you face, or do you face, when you're working on like a smaller scale film like this?
Well, we have to compare with what we have as a regular basis. And for me, even though it's an indie film, there was a certain comfort in a way compared to other types of films that I do that don't even have that. So for us, it was kind of a good thing, and there was enough to be working. But the difficulties of this was more because we had to work between Canada and the States, and also we reached a point where we had a picture lock at the beginning of COVID. So on March, April 2020, I think places were closing down, and we had to finish it. So that was difficult, and to deal with the two countries at that time, it was okay. For us in Montreal, there was still going on. We could do film, we could mix. The places were still open, but we had to, at that time, we were only able to kind of mix one person in a mixing studio. So we did the film all in our rooms separately in a way. So pre-mix was done like at Mel's here in Montreal, and then we completed the mix in LA with Sean because she couldn't come to Montreal to finish the film. So there was like a big process of bringing the film to LA to finish it with Alexandra, and so there was a lot of play around, I have to say, with this film in the context that we live, and yeah, other difficulties for a film like this would be the sounds. In a way, so it's not everybody that has the sounds to make a film like this, but in that regard, I had a lot of recordings that I done myself in schools, on the East Coast, on the forest in the North American. So I was like well covered. So that helped me in that regard. And another difficulty of this film was the crowds. There was a lot of crowds, and they were quite typical in a way from Boston accent, and and it's so we had to reach the a point where we would have voices that would fit and would have the same accent and the same locality that we have in the film. So that was another difficulty considering the budget. That those were the areas that we had to invent, and we had to be very specific too, not overdo it, focus on all the right spots for it. But we were able to do it and fit it all together. So yeah.
Yeah, it certainly worked out. No, it's a labor of love, and clearly it paid off. Looking at the reception at the Sundance Film Festival when it came out, just winning a bunch of prizes, rave reviews, bought by Apple. Just as we wrap up here, I'm curious, why do you think the film really has resonated with viewers as much as it has?
Well, the first time I saw it, and it was before I worked on it, I really thought that the story was really touching, and that it was like going to a large audience, and the way that it was actually told, it was very simple and touching. So combining all that with the good work of DOP, actors, it's like a good film is really the result of a good work from like most of the people, or all of them, ideally. But and it's in this case, I think everybody did a really, really good job, and the film was good. So if you combine these together, there are possibilities that a film reaches a point where actually Apple bought it, and for 25 million, I think. So it's like when it's over, they buy it 25 million. Wow, that's a sign that actually it's a good film, and the result that actually people are watching it, it's just normal. I think it's normal because it's a really good film, and it has a place in the awards for sure, I think. It's not necessarily because there's not too much explosions and big sound scenes, like, you know, and spectacular. Sometimes a film is something else. It's sometimes a film is in other areas, and it can be as good to watch. And sound can also help as much as well to give the results. So yeah, I think that when a film is good, it's because everybody did a really good job, and all this together brings it to something larger than us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yes, very well said. And for those of you watching, like and subscribe for more interviews, and head to goldderby.com to make your Oscar predictions. Thanks so much for talking with me today, Martin.
Hey, no problem. Thank you.